Welcome back to the Nassau Hockey Podcast. I'm James Nichols of the Fourth Period. With me, as always, is John Zella of the Hockey Writers. What's going on, pal?
My back hurts because I'm in my 30s, and that's just a thing that happens now. I don't know. Out of nowhere. I was fine all day. 20 minutes ago, it was like, oh, you have a pain here now. That's a thing.
Yeah, it definitely is a thing. I experience it myself, as I am also now in my 30s. Super fun. I love it. I'm not being sarcastic when I say that.
Yeah, and then obviously we're powering through here. It's playoff time. We have to act like an NHLer here and just power through the pain.
Yeah, I'm looking at our notes, and something just happened about less than an hour ago in the NHL. I don't know if you even saw it, but
I probably did.
I'm going to start off the show with that. In Bruce Cassidy, hired by the Vegas Golden Knights. That automatically eliminates Barry Trotz from going there, obviously, because he was in contention for that head coaching job. We were aware that he did have an interview with them, but they ultimately went with Bruce Cassidy. So, one, thoughts on that hire, and two, thoughts on what happens next in the coaching logjam that there is right now, right? Because everybody was waiting for Barry Trotz, and then Cassidy became available. But thoughts on the coaching logjam and what might happen there next?
Cassidy's interesting in Vegas. I feel like that's a good fit considering the types of teams Cassidy's coached in Boston.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would compare Vegas, who struggled mightily, a lot of injuries and different things. But they have a really good team. And like I said, Cassidy's had that experience, so maybe that'll line up. There's stars, there's players lower in the lineup, there's defenses, goalies that are very talented. So if he can be the kind of the glue that the team needs, that they really have not been able to find since Gerard Gallant, I think it'll work out there. I saw that a Winnipeg brewery offered Trotz a lifetime supply of beer.
They did.
To come to Winnipeg. So that's interesting. I wonder if that'll shake out. It's kind of going home for him. So that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I do want to just add in there. I don't think the brewery will actually have anything to do with that decision.
Likely that'll be the case, that it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Who else is available now?
Well, you have Jim Montgomery, who's coming off of a contract with the St. Louis Blues. Pete DeBoer is out there, and
Pete DeBoer was the other one.
Yeah, he's rumored to possibly be going somewhere like Dallas.
He was in Vegas for like a minute.
Well, that's the thing.
He wasn't there very long. I don't like that team. I don't know why you're like, players are signing there. I guess if you're Jack Eichel, that makes a ton of sense. You just want out of Buffalo. Like, what could be worse than that?
Yeah.
But I don't know I don't know who's signing in Buffalo, in Vegas willingly at this point. Like,
well, right. That's the thing, because it's the door's revolving there with not just coaches, anybody really.
Anybody. And like players are finding out on Twitter that they're traded, or like that is not, if Lamoriello goes too far, maybe with loyalty, Vegas goes the complete opposit direction.
Not far enough, yeah.
And not far enough, not at all. Yeah, outside of signing players, granted, I'm not in the locker room. I don't kind of like perks they get if they're helping families. Like, maybe they really are going above and beyond, and it's frankly none of our business. But as far as we can tell, it doesn't look good. Like, on an optics perspective, trying to get, that NHL player family is pretty tight. So if it is going better than what it seems to the rest of us civilians, I imagine they know, but it doesn't look good from where we sit. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. So you almost want to congratulate Bruce Cassidy on getting a job for the next 2.5 years, and then pretty much saying, who knows after that.
I wonder what the expectations are in Vegas at this point, right? I think they have some cap gymnastics they have to get through this summer, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Stone will be back. Eichel is now there.
Yeah.
They have a couple of kind of big contracts on the books.
They do.
So I'm not really sure what the expectations are and then how they're going to execute any of that. I think they're over the cap already.
Yeah, so they have 0 cap space, right now. Oh, no, I'm sorry, they have 200 grand in cap space available right now. They have RFAs and Keegan Kostler, Nicholas Roy, and Matthias Janmark, as well as Dylan Coughlin. So and they only have
They have
oh,
one
no,
goalie. They just have
they have
Leonard.
no, they have 2 goalies. They have Laner and they have Brossoit.
Oh, right.
Oh, sorry, and also on injured reserve currently is Nick Hague, Brett Howden, Jake Bischoff, and Riley Smith, who all need contracts. Um, so they have a bunch of money that they need to figure out because there are contracts here that will put them over. They
Yeah,
have
and they
less
only
than
have
that
9.
200.
They have 9 forwards. Well, really, they have 6 forwards signed. No, they have 9 forwards signed right now.
Yes, 9.
So they need an entire another line.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the goalie uh Brossoit is 2.3. That they have some, yeah, they have some stuff they need to figure out over there.
Yeah.
If you're looking, I don't know the team that well. I mean, you got to think Dadonov he has a year left. Um,
You have to think that's going to be the first contract that they try to move.
yeah, considering they already tried to do it, but
Yeah.
I wonder where he goes. He's not had. I mean, he's a 20. Wow, yeah. I mean, he's a 25, 30 goal scorer.
Yeah.
Well, this year was a little bit of a down year, and last year wasn't great in Ottawa, but with the Florida Panthers in 3 seasons, he was pretty okay. He didn't have a
Yeah,
lot of
no.
playoff success with them, but I mean, his age kind of prevents, like, I don't think we want to have him in the Islanders conversation necessarily.
No.
Maybe as and not at $5 million. Like, the Islanders just simply cannot afford that.
Yes, no.
Um, but yeah, Vegas is interesting. Like I said, I wonder what the expectations are. Is it simply make I mean, win the Stanley Cup, blah blah blah, that kind of crap. But like realistically, are they just trying to get out of the first round after missing the playoffs? Like, what's the
No, I'd say that with the star power they have on their team and hiring a guy like Cassidy, I'd say that it's pretty much get to the Stanley Cup again. I
yeah
think that's been
foot
the
to the
goal.
floor?
Yeah, foot to the floor. I think that's been the goal all along. Just because I know they have Eichel for the next 4 years, Stone for the next five, and Petrangelo also for the next five. But the window for this team is closing. I wouldn't say similarly to the Islanders, but this window is definitely closing because again, all of their forwards, none of them are younger than 25, and that's not necessarily bad, but the average age of the team is 28.4 in the forward group. Um, and in the defensive group, the average age is 28.7. So I think the window here is starting to close. They've been literally a contender since 2017 when they started. So this is the first year that they missed the playoffs. I think a hiring like Cassidy is a message saying we're going for it again. He's only had success at the NHL level. He hasn't had any losing seasons, even though he was just fired. None. So I
Yeah,
think the idea here is for Cassidy to come and bring that defensive mindset to a pretty star-studded group, like he did with Boston, that you've seen have the ability to go on deep playoff runs. I think that this Vegas team, when not injured, because let's face it, I think that's the only reason they missed the playoffs last season. This Vegas team has the ability to go on a deep cup run. Um, and with Cassidy's defensive structure, which is I'm not going to say it's the same as Trotz's, but it's similar. I think that they have a good chance of owning the division again and getting right back into cup contention.
yeah. I think they're in a pretty weak division too, so that
Yeah,
opportunity is definitely there. Yeah, I mean, Eichel is essentially their Barzell, and I mean, he's just a year older.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, looking at the Islanders moving forward, they get a little bit younger. Even bringing Parise back, it really depends on who they bring in that offensive group
right.
and defense at this point. But they're all, you know, save for Dobson,
Yeah,
they're all 24 or older, but they have experience and teams go on these runs all the time with a mixed. with the mixed group. I don't think the Lightning are terribly young. Um, they have like maybe one player under 25. Um, in the forward group, maybe another on D. I'm not really sure, and they might not
Hmm.
even be used all the time. Um, but they let their players kind of marinate in Syracuse. I
Yeah.
saw a lot of these players for a long time, and that went in the last few years out, right before COVID, they were going deep into the playoffs. Cal Cal Foot, um, a lot of that. I think Belmar was here. Obviously, you saw like Kucherov was here for a long time, and I think Braden Point. Like some of these players were Palat for sure. Um,
Killorn.
I don't remember. Maybe other people here would have a little bit better of a memory about that. But like they were kind of making runs here uh, for a while, and it was very exciting. They was very very good teams. So um, yeah, I don't think having an average age of 28, in your forward group, maybe the same in your defense. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. But again, Bruce Cassidy, now the head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. Interesting to see how the dominoes fall after that because it seemed like everybody was waiting on Trotz, but now that Cassidy is in Vegas, maybe we'll know sooner rather than later what Trotz's decision, if any, will come. And what I mean by if any is there's still that possibility he decides he doesn't even want to be a coach right now.
Yeah, and he may have been a year away from making that decision, and the conversation that Lamoriello and I don't know this. Not, I'm speculating here.
Yeah.
A conversation happened with Lambert, Lamoriello, and Trotz, and I think we've said this before. Trotz was like, "Yeah, I don't know that I would re up after next year. I'm not really sure. I want to go through this year." Lambert's like, "I'm getting calls," and Lamoriello's like, "We're gonna make that decision now." Then
Yeah,
Trotz, see you
absolutely.
later, Lambert, and maybe they weren't all together and it was just all separately. Lamoriello just kind of made an executive decision, said, "All right, if we're gonna, I have the opportunity. There's a chance I lose both of these coaches, and I think Lambert can really make it. Let's just speed this up a year, and I get to control when it happens."
Yep.
So if I had to guess how that all went down, that may be it.
Yeah, you're probably right in saying that. So, alas, Lane Lambert is the head coach, and there are a number of good coaches available now for a number of coaching vacancies, and Vegas is now one of those that are filled. And again, we'll see how the dominoes fall. But all right, let's talk about the Stanley Cup Finals that have now been set. They will begin on Wednesday, which is tomorrow or today, as you're listening to this, and it will be between the Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning, who mount the comeback after being down 2 games to none in the Eastern Conference Final. They win 4 straight games because you can never count out the champs, and they are the champions until they are not. So, John, my question for you is: who do you have winning it all? How many games? And what does the series come down to?
It's a really good question. I would I think this is a good final altogether. I think it's gonna be hard to
Oh yeah.
really to nail it down. I
Mhm.
think it goes 7 games. Um, I think Tampa has the edge here just on goaltending, even if the Avalanche might be a little bit deeper. Um, maybe on defense and with the offensive like their offensive ability on defense and things like that. If Kadri and Point, I heard Point's coming back. I also heard Kadri
Possibly,
might
yeah.
be coming back. So that's
Possibly.
that's not exactly a wash, but Kadri's been one of their best players in Colorado, and Braden Point obviously is one of the better players on Tampa Bay. So
Yeah.
whether or not they're in the, it only makes a difference if only one of them comes back. As far as that depth, but I have a hard time rooting against Vasilevsky, frankly.
Yep.
And both of these teams have gotten rest at some point in these playoffs. Tampa Bay now has momentum. And I think as
Yeah.
far as a storyline is concerned, there's good ones on both sides, but I really want to recognize greatness in the moment and watching Tampa Bay win 3 in a row,
Yep.
especially like putting away the notion that, oh, they won in COVID years and this thing and that thing, to purely say, and you forget how close they were in previous years outside, before the Columbus sweep, how close they were in conference finals before. They were really close
Yeah.
in other years. So I think that perspective is a little bit off. But I think this puts the notion kind of to bed that they didn't deserve it and they just got there in a COVID year and all that kind of crap. Um, so yeah, I kind of want to just witness greatness in real time. So I'm Tampa in 7, and it comes down to Vasilevsky, plain and simple.
Yeah, so a couple things here for me. One, I like your comment in witnessing greatness, right? Because the Tampa Bay New York Islanders comparisons are starting, and I don't mean today's New York Islanders. I mean the 1980s New York Islanders, who built a dynasty with 19 straight wins in the postseason, in postseason series, and claiming 4 Stanley Cups. And now the Lightning are obviously going for their third. Um, and the comparisons are being made, right? Are the Lightning the next dynasty? Only 3 teams in their history have won 3 cups in a row. It's the Islanders, I think it's
Edmonton.
the
Well,
Maple Leafs, right? Or is it
the
the
Habs,
the
Isles,
Habs?
Oilers,
I think that's it.
Leafs.
I think
Leafs
that's
did
it.
it. Yeah, Leafs did it 2 separate occasions, I think, in the 40s and the 60s. But other than that, something like that.
Yeah.
And the
So
Habs had done it a couple times.
but anyway, but the point is that at this point, what are you going to say, right? They did it in a COVID year, they did it in a bubble year, and now they're doing it in a regular year. So I do agree with you recognizing the greatness. My head says Tampa in 6. My heart
Wow.
says Avalanche in 7.
I mean, I think the Avalanche winning is a great story. That puts McKinnon
Absolutely.
firmly in that next kind of elite, the 1% or the 0.1% of elite NHLers,
Yeah.
especially in today's game. So I think that's a great story. You want to see some of those guys that, it would be great. Devon Taves, that's a fantastic story. I also want to point out, if you want to get really nitty gritty about it, and I don't love this as an argument, but I'm sure somebody is thinking it, whether they listen to this show or not is a different story. But somebody out there is thinking, they're going to make the comment, well, especially if they're an Islander fan, but if they're going to get down and dirty to it, that, oh, Tampa Bay didn't go through full seasons before. So
None of
it's,
that
like,
matters.
it is an asterisk next to them anyway
No.
because it was shorter. And somebody's bound to say, well, the Islanders and the Oilers and all these other teams played entire seasons prior to winning them, especially the 19 playoff series. The Islanders, it was, you have to remember that was actually 5 straight Cup final appearances,
Yeah, it was.
and plus full seasons.
Correct.
So is there something there? Maybe, but I don't know that it's worth
I don't buy it.
actually having. Yeah, I
It's
I
not.
don't I don't really like that as an argument.
Arguably, they went through maybe tougher situations, having to be isolated for months, not being able
Yeah,
to
that's a great point.
contribute to their regular regiments every single day. There was just so much happening in those years, and the continued dominance says a lot about the character of that team, and just the evolution of the game. They were both games were hard in their respective eras. The 80s hockey era, it was largely different than today's. And they were both dominant in their eras. But I think today's takes more skill than it does grit. But at the same time, when you look at the playoffs, you see how chippy and grindy it does get out there. And I think Tampa is one of those teams where they could play any game you want. You want to skill it up out here, we can do that. You want to get real physical, we can do that too. Like anything goes for Tampa.
Absolutely.
So what does it come down to for me? Goaltending is definitely a factor. Darcy Kemper, can he stay healthy? Pavel Francois, is he enough if Kemper can't? On the other end, you're looking at the best goaltender in the world. So
Yeah.
not just the NHL, in the world. So can I don't know, the Avalanche outskill the Lightning, right? Because they're super fast. They have a ton of superstars on that team, just as many as the Lightning have.
Yeah.
Um, is
I
there is
definitely,
their
definitely.
defense better? Cal McCarr, is he the best defenseman in the world right now? Well, the Lightning have a Victor Hedman. And well, we have a Ryan McDonough. Well, we have a Devin Tays. Sam Gerard's not in this series because he's injured. He's out, he's done for the
The
off
play.
season.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, for the playoffs. So really, you're right. It does come down to goaltending. I'm totally with you there.
Can the
Um,
Stars, like, I think both of these teams have a lot of depth on
yeah,
offense.
they
They can
do.
both run up the score. They can both play tight.
Yeah,
Those Stars are going to, and how the Rangers got as far as they did, but what Tampa did and what the Islanders have done in the past, and any good playoff
yeah,
team. And I continue to say this, that your top six or even your top line with the other team are kind of a wash. They need to score, right? Or shut down the other top line, right? Like,
yeah,
they either both teams top line aren't doing anything, or they're both scoring. One's a higher scoring game than the other, obviously, but you need those players down the lineup, and that's where it's been somebody else for the Lightning every game. It was some Stamkos had a game, Palat had a game. Um, that's where it's going to come into play here. Even Sergachev, I think, had a game where he was the one that had 2 goals. Um, there's a lot of opportunity here for it to be really exciting. This is going back to, and not to take any credit away even from the Islanders over the last couple of years of, top 4 teams, or, the final 4 teams and the final 2 teams. This is what the final should look like, right? It should be the Avalanche and
yep,
the Lightning, right?
yep.
Last year, if it was the Islanders and Montreal, you would never have heard the end, or even the Islanders and Dallas 2 years ago. In all honesty, yes, they got there and they did what they needed to do in the situation that they were in. They took advantage of it and they played really well, and you can't take that away from them, right? Those 3 teams really didn't deserve to be in the Final Four, and I'll slightly put the Islanders in that group. I know you don't like
Why?
that.
Why? Not even just for the
In the
Islanders, for all those
I
teams.
think
Why?
I don't think Dallas. I mean, you got to look at the results too of those series that Tampa Bay kind of took it to Dallas and Montreal pretty easily. Like,
Sure.
it wasn't very exciting, but in a normal year, they don't make it all the way. And that to me is, this is a year where the final 4 were really good teams. They deserved to be there. I don't think you would have chosen the Oilers in the beginning of the playoffs to make it all the way, but they figured it out. And this is what the final should be. The 2 best teams in the Rangers, if they won, they deserve to be there. But even they were ahead of schedule, right? Like, you
Yeah.
not that they
I
don't
see what you're
deserve it,
saying.
but it's like, oh, okay, like, they had a run. And that's, look, some St. Louis just has a run, they finally win, and they do the whole thing. Washington was the same way, perennial playoff teams without any success past the second round, frankly, or they got into the second round, they'd constantly lose. Um, but yeah, this is just what this should look like in
I
full years. The end of the playoffs, these are the 2 teams that are standing, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I struggle with the idea that certain teams don't deserve to get as far as they did because they had to overcome certain obstacles to get there, and they
I
did just that.
I
But I
understand. I
understand what
understand.
you're saying. The best on best, best in the East is the Lightning, only because they're the defending champs, right? They statistically weren't the best in season. I think they came in third in the
And
Atlantic, if I'm not mistaken.
they swept the President's
They
Trophy.
swept the
Then
President's Trophy winner.
they didn't just sweep them, right? Something that keeps coming up in the front of
They
my
only
mind
scored
is,
4 goals in 4 games. Is that correct?
no, they had 3 goals against in that series. I don't think they scored 4 goals.
No, I'm talking about the Panthers. The Panthers
Yes,
only
yes.
scored 4 goals in
I
4
think it
games.
was 3. If it was
Maybe it
4, that's
was.
still ridiculous.
Right, a goal a
That's
game.
the Yeah, and I think that's the thing. If you rightfully you earn your spot in the play. And I guess the Islanders, they took the situation they had last season. They figured it out. The year before, they still had to do the play in and go from there. Look, teams like Toronto didn't make it. Montreal did the thing, right? I'm not saying they don't deserve it,
Yeah,
but in a normal year, they would not have been there. The Islanders were on a
maybe.
downswing going into that. They get involved in the play in. Again, you're taking the situation that they were given. They're not going to say, oh, well, we don't deserve it. No, right. I get that. Right. All this is a little bit with a grain of salt, but I like how this is the result. This is back to Blues in 2019 Blues Bruins. Those are good teams.
Yeah,
Those are good final. Um, the year before that, Vegas, Washington, those are good teams, right? There was no flukiness. There was no one player got hot and carried them. You know what I mean? Like the best, star studded, going to the final. It's not
yeah.
going to be a sweep in either direction here. If it is, they're going a million overtimes in each game, where it may as well have been an 8-game series or 9-game series. But we're probably belaboring that a little bit.
Interesting as it stands. I'm sitting here. I'm looking at a tweet by the Athletic. They tweeted the series probability for each team to win. What would you say it is before I read it to you? Percentage wise, what percent does each team have to win?
I have a feeling that they're not giving Tampa Bay the edge for some reason. I did not see what this is. Is it ridiculous? Like 70-30 Avalanche?
You're
Like
not far off.
67-33?
You're pretty close.
Like it's something like that.
It's 61-39.
I think they just because home ice advantage, right? If
That's a major factor, and that might be why um the edge does go to the Avs. 8% for the Avs to win in 4 games, 17% for the Avs to win in 5, 18% to win in 6 or 7.
I think, just like the Rangers series and what we had talked about last week in how can Tampa win? How can the Rangers win? And what I said about Tampa is it all hinges on game 5. If they can take away home ice advantage from the Rangers, that's it. And they had
Yeah.
already lost again. They had tied the series 2-2.
Right.
Um, I think it's a little bit of a difference here. If
Ye
they steal one on the road, as they say in playoff series, if they're able to steal one on the road, better even if it's game 1, and make game 2 a battle, even if they lose, they just need to go home
yeah.
tied. I mean, that's a tale as old as time. That's not a new. I didn't say anything groundbreaking there, but truly, in their case, if they can just steal one on the road, they're in good shape. And then it puts more pressure on the Avalanche in game 3 to flip the script and kind of do the same thing, and then play it out and then it's a battle.
Yeah,
Then you're talking about the last 3 or 4 games being pretty serious.
yeah. I didn't see if they did this, but I wonder how soon Tampa Bay got to Colorado, just because Edmonton did the same thing in order to adjust to the elevation in
Mm,
order in
that's a good
lung
call.
lung capacity wise. I wonder how soon Tampa decided to get to Denver in order to adjust, because that's a factor. Whether
They
you,
had a
the
few days, right? It was a Saturday night
yeah
that they won. So even if they got there on Monday, it gives them 2 full days to adjust and skate on
Yeah, I
Tuesday.
was
And
reading something about when Edmonton did it, but the idea was that it took like a week to adjust. So you wonder if that plays any sort of factor into this kind of thing.
you could say that might be true. The same thing where Tampa was a little sleepy in the beginning of the series against the Rangers, and the Rangers played well, and they deserve those games. Excuses aside, you still got to show up, right? Like I've said about the Islanders, I I don't want to hear it. Your professionals show up at a certain point. Like
Yeah,
I can't just list off excuses forever. Um, but then Tampa Bay woke up and the Rangers didn't put the pedal down, and here we are. Um, the Avalanche are in the same spot. they've been off for a bit, kind of watching the end of the series, having swept them. So Tampa Bay, little momentum. They had some time off too. Um, so maybe all that's erased at this point. Like they've had
Yeah.
time now. Now they are, off the ice, or at
Yeah.
least not in a game for 3 days, and they haven't really played all that much. Um, lately. I think it was like 17 games in 34 days. Like is an an okay schedule. It's still grueling. It's still, there's 4 rounds of playoffs, but
Yeah.
yeah, I wonder what team has the edge there. Like Avalanche, maybe a little rusty, but Tampa Bay um has to get used to playing in Colorado.
Yeah.
So maybe it's irrelevant. Maybe both of those things kind of wash each other out and it doesn't matter, but we'll see.
Yeah. 2 teams left standing. Um, by this time next week, we might have a champ. Let's talk a little bit about the Islanders now. And one of the questions that were posed um, really is just how can the Islanders reinvent themselves under Lambert? Is it incoming player dependent?
So I've been thinking about this, and I'm gonna write about it and spend a little bit more time, but I wanted to flesh it out with you in kind of real time because what I wrote um months ago, I think even before the end of the season, or maybe as soon as they were officially eliminated, I had wrote that there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made on the roster, and I think that's important to like that's our focus. Um, as and something we focused on, right? We haven't really touched on this particular aspect of it. I think it's hard to get in Lambert's head. You have to imagine his strategies will be and deployment and all that will be pretty similar to Trot's, but I don't anticipate it being carbon copies. Um, I do think it's incoming player dependent. I do think it has to do with who can step up and kind of play the roles that Lambert's going to give them. But as I wrote, while Trotz was still the coach, that they needed a strategy adjustment. They can't they can run a lot back. There's a lot that they can just do again. They need to kind of figure out some different strategies, and that's having the defense jump up a little bit more, um, giving players like Barzell a little bit more breathing room out there. Obviously, giving player someone like Barzell line mates is going to help, but even the best line mates under Trotz, I wonder what that looks like on a consistent basis. Right? They had their nights. Even Eberle had, back when Eberle was on the team, they had their nights where they would light up a team. Right?
Yeah.
That not that they're going to light people up, but they need to get into that 3+ goals a game to compete
Yeah. They
kind of
do.
at this level on a regular basis. So they need to reinvent themselves as more of a more balanced team,
Who
not the
specifically?
players, not the players. The coaching staff needs to develop strategies that are more balanced. They can't just be a defensive stalwart team that it works really well in the playoffs. If they're going to compete with some of these teams, they need to kind of what they were when Trotz first got there. They can play you, they can skate with you any other way, anyway. Like you were saying about Tampa Bay. You want to play tough, you want to do this, you want to do that. What we saw this season was that strategy unravel a little bit. They need to get back to being a little bit more balanced of a team and kind of reinvent themselves as somebody again that can kind of skate with anybody.
So in your mind, it's just on the coaching
No,
staff, players themselves don't need to step up.
no, I absolutely think that the players need to step up,
Okay,
but
so then
some of that is again, some of that is player dependent. Some of that is who on the roster, whether that Bailey returns, whether Bavili returns, whatever this roster look like, right? Palmieri needs to step up early in the season. Wallstrom needs to come into the season with his head on straight.
yeah.
Um, not be this unhinged player that we saw punching players at the end of the season. Like there's a lot of growing up to do in this offseason on a number of levels. Um, but I think some more attention needs to be put on the coaching strategies and what they're allowing, like not allowing the players to do, but um
How much room they're giving them to skate out there. How
all sorts
much
of
they're
the
allowing them
strategies.
to. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
So I think that more attention needs to be put on that, frankly. It's not
Yeah.
just on, yes, a lot of it is going to be on who Lamoriello brings in. And I think criticism uh, on who he brings in, not if he brings somebody in, but when he brings somebody in, because he needs to do it, is very fair, right? I think that's where everyone's going to break it down for a month and a half plus, after, heading into
Yeah.
the season. And that's fine. Um, But I think be prepared to like be nitty gritty on what are we seeing the differences in how this team is playing under Lambert versus
Oh
under
yeah.
Trotz.
Yeah.
Because how he's utilizing those players, just like how Trotz got more out of that roster than previous coaches, what can Lambert now do? Is this an opportunity for them to just be a slightly different team to find that success? So I think this is a long term question and not one with an answer of like, how are they going to do it? I think a very simple answer is to be more balanced. I'm not an NHL coach. So that answer is going to come out later. But I think it's important to pose at this point as we're getting close to free agency. We're going to talk all the questions in our mailbag today. We're all about who are they going to bring in and this and that. It's about Lamoriello. It's about the players. I think so much of it is also, once the roster is set, that's it. Lamoriello did his, you want to call it 33%. He did his part. It's on the other 66%, which is the coaching and the players to figure that out. Or
Yeah.
however you want to split up that remaining bit.
I echo everything you just said. But the one thing that I do want to put emphasis on is the roster. And in order for, I think, the Islanders to take that next step forward, they need a legitimate first line. And the reason why I say that is because they're built with a bunch of guys who could play anywhere. And that's a great thing to have. But you also need those bona fide number one.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm like, yeah, I totally agree and I know where you're going, but what we've not talked about and what hasn't been discussed is what happens when those players show up. Look at
right.
good
And
teams
that's
that
true.
don't play well, period. Look at Vegas, look, injuries and this and that again. Excuse. Any good team with a bunch of good play. Look at Florida.
Yeah. I'm with you.
You know, that's all. It's all fine and dandy, and there's a
Yeah.
good coach there. Even after Quenneville, I forget the coaches there, but look at the Oilers. You can have the players all you want, and they need them. I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think some focus needs to be put on how is the team going to change and evolve this season from behind the bench strategically, not just on paper on the roster.
Yeah, you're probably right. My only comment on that was that I think that it's all there. I think that's all going to be set in stone and in place, and be effective. It's just I think that they also need to have those first line talents to knock everybody down a peg, so everybody's where they belong in the lineup.
100%. The
So
deployment, and that's why I put those other questions in there.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
it is player dependent. Yes, players need to step up,
yeah,
but there's an element of we need to do something different strategically. The
yeah,
power play, the penalty kill, how we're breaking the puck out, the neutral zone, whatever they're gonna do, however they're gonna do the forechecks. They need to kind of think through that a little bit more.
yeah. And I think that that has a lot to do with um the blue line. Who was on the blue line and how they were able to utilize the blue line, and it really was hindered by having Chara and Green as everyday regular defensemen.
Oh, they
They
were
weren't
getting
able
exploited.
to, yeah, and they weren't able to start the rush as often as they used to be when they had Devin Tays and Nick Letty on the back end. So that's probably um the most, in my mind, the most important uh, area to improve on this offseason. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the mailbag. But moving forward, I wrote an article yesterday, and it looks like you put it in the notes here. So thank you for that. Um, and the questions started to arise after the Eastern Conference Final. You saw Vasilevsky, you saw Igor Shesterkin, and they were both fantastic in their own way, in their own right, in the series and in the playoffs so far. And we'll see with Vasilevsky if he can do it for a third time. against the Colorado Avalanche. Um, but it begs the question because when you look into the statistics of the 2021-22 season, is Sorokin on the same level as Shesterkin and Vasilevsky? I know what I wrote, but let's start with what you think.
I don't think so yet. So I'm gonna. I mean, I don't want to be like. I didn't want my answer to be no. But I'll. In the simplest terms, no. I don't think he's quite there yet. He has that opportunity this year. He's poised to be in that top 3 goalies conversation in the league this upcoming year. He showed what he could do with a bad team in front of him. When asked upon in the last year and in the playoffs, he played really well.
Yep.
Um, these 2 players have proved it, and they were the bona fide number 1, no questions asked goalie. Even if it wasn't for 2 seasons, it's been for 1. Sorokin mostly had that opportunity this year, but the team's success kind of clouds that a little bit. You need to like Shesterkin did all season. It was this guy's a Vezina candidate. He's dragging this team, kicking and streaming, and every once in a while, the team in front of him is putting up a hell of a game. They wound up doing it in the playoffs, whether they played bad goalies or whatever the case is. Just like the Islanders, they had to take advantage of what was in front of them. They didn't say, "Oh, well, we'll give you a few days. You don't have your number 1 goalie.
Yeah.
We don't want to play Louis Domingue. Like, give us a challenge." No, no, no. You're going to go there. You take your opportunity. I totally get that. But the short answer is not yet. He needs to prove that this season. I think. I think he's there. I think he's a top 5 goalie in the league. I don't know who that number 4 is, frankly. So maybe he's a top 3 goalie. I think he needs to like firmly have that number 1 spot and be that guy in the playoffs the entire time. This is kind of like if you think of who the number 1 goalie is for the Islanders in the 80s. You had Melanson and you had Smith. Melanson played more games in the regular season than Smith, but Smith is the goalie. When you look back at those teams, you're never like, oh, they were a 2 goalie team because Smith played the playoffs. He was the number 1 goalie. And that's kind of what when the Islanders went on these runs, first it was Grice and Varlamov, but right? Am I making that up?
Uh, it was Grice and Varlamov. Yes.
Who and then Grice had his moment, but then it was Sorokin and Varlamov was still the number 1 goal guy.
Yep.
This year he didn't have that opportunity. Seemingly he would have had that chance, but he just hasn't yet. So I think there's some when you're going to put goalies into that elite kind of category, you need to have a little bit of playoff experience. I know that's not like completely fair, but just like McKinnon kind of bringing him to that 0.1% with a Stanley Cup, when you're talking about the Hall of Fame, it's not the whole very good. So when you're talking about elite players, you kind of need to have that playoff experience and be the bona fide number 1 in a winning season.
Yeah, I see your point. And I don't think that you're wrong. I do think that he deserves to be in the conversation. And you're right.
Absolutely. The
Maybe,
converse, like I said, that the not yet is that there's an ongoing. It's always an ongoing
yeah,
conversation.
because like you said, it's Vasilevsky in his own rank. Then it's Shesterkin. After that, it's probably Sorokin. I was looking at the statistics and he was very good in, the save percentage, second overall in the league. Um, he had a 2.4 goals against average and 7 shutouts for second overall in the league. Like he was, I'm sorry, fourth overall in goals against. So not many were better than him statistically with the raw stats. Then looking a little deeper, um, at 5-on-5, he was first overall in uh save percentage with a 936. Um, first overall with a goal saved above anticipated with a 26.77. Um, and third overall in goals against average at 5-on-5. And the high danger chances is where I was like really blown away. First overall in high danger save percentage, first overall in high danger goals against average, and first overall in high danger goals saved above anticipated. Eh, And that was 6 points more than the next goaltender in high danger goals saved above anticipated. So it's like he turns it on that much more when he really needs to like make sure the puck stays out of the net
Well,
in those high danger chances. So I understand what you're saying though, right?
I'll
Vasilevsky has the hardware, right? He is the best in the world because one, how good he is, and two, how much hardware he's brought in. He's won and it was a main reason why the Lightning won what they did win. Now, Shesterkin went on an unbelievable run this season, and he had more games played in the playoffs this season than Sorokin has had previously. I do think, though, that if Sorokin and the Islanders did make it to the postseason, it would have been Sorokin's net.
yeah, I agree, and I said that.
I
I
understand. I understand that we don't judge things based on what could have been. However, looking into the analytics and how good Sorokin was, nobody was really better than him in a majority of the advanced analytics. And looking at the raw analytics, he was also in the top two, top three most of the time. So
yeah,
I
he
think he
did have
definitely deserves to be in that 1, 2, 3 conversation. It's always going to be Vasilevsky until somebody dethrones him. Shesterkin is probably um or should be second, and I'm pretty convinced that third is going to be Ilya Sorokin. Or it should be Ilya Sorokin in a lot of arguments. I know that there's going to be, um, other goaltenders that could be argued, such as Thatcher Demko, maybe Jacob Markstrom, UC Saros. There are excellent goaltenders in the
no, I
NHL.
don't
There's
think
a
they're
lot of
on
them.
that. I think what if this it's not all right. So the question isn't is he the number 3? It's is he in the is what's the question?
Is he
Is
on
he on
the
the
same
same
level as
level? No.
Shesterkin and Vasilevsky? Now,
No.
you
I mean
say
that
no, but
I
his
think
his analytics are
so I
better.
think so the underlying thing, and I don't know how to break this down, not a math guy. So I don't know how to break this down. So he had 7 shutouts, right? He led the league, was second in the league. What did you say?
He was second in the league to Jacob
Second, all
Markstrom.
right. So those number, right? You've got to earn those, but it does inflate some of those other numbers. He did have a winning record. I just wonder.
But look at how bad the Islanders were this season, and he did
I
all of
I
this.
I understand that, and I'm not discounting the advanced. That those are. I didn't know that, and although that's fantastic, I think it definitely puts him in there. But you got to earn it. I think it again in the playoffs.
I
Roland Mel
agree with you there.
Roland Mellinson is not remembered as an Islander goalie. He played more games in the regular season than Billy Smith.
Now, here's my question though, because we talk about getting to the playoffs. What happens if he just has an extremely unlucky streak of a career where he just doesn't, for some reason or another, get to the playoffs because his team is that bad? And
It
I don't know how common
it's
it is
not
for a player to play their whole career without getting to the playoffs. But my point is, what if there's just so much out of his control in his career? He makes some bad decisions contract
that's
wise
then that
and is stuck
sucks.
on teams, but he plays outstanding in the regular season, no matter what.
Look at
Can he still
Ray.
not be considered one of the better goaltenders?
I mean, look at it took the thing is it's if you're unless you're and this could be the debate. He's got to do it over a long period of time, but like if Hasek never won a cup, he was never traded or UFA or whatever, however he got to Detroit, well, first Ottawa and then Detroit, he's still the best goalie far and away. End of sentence. In the 90s, maybe ever, right?
Okay.
He was elite for so long outside of those cups, right? I think with Sorokin, you just have to be, if you're going to be in that conversation, and let's just, Vasilevsky's proved it. He needs to sustain it, like I think to be um, Hall of Fame material and that, this and that. Like, I think it's got to be more than you won, let's call it 3 cups and you have these numbers and blah, blah, blah. Like, it might need to be a little bit more than that. I think he's largely done it, but like if he retired tomorrow, does he make it? I don't know. Shesterkin has a long way to go to get to even Vasilevsky's level or even Hall of Fame level. I think Sorokin just does the same thing. He'd have to be that dominant for a very long time. Again, not the Hall of Very Good, Hall of Fame. So it might take I know that's not exactly the conversation that we're having. It's about are they good right now? Um, but yeah, I think it just needs to take some time.
Yeah, no,
I don't think he's definitely in that conversation, the one that we're having, and the larger one. I saw Jeff Merrick was having that conversation on 32 Thoughts with he brought up that Sorokin's not getting enough love. I don't know exactly what he said. Yeah, your point is well made. The underlying numbers are there. He could absolutely just have a bad couple of years with the Islanders where he's really good, the team's not very good, and that's just the luck of it. I'm trying to
correct.
think of players that they went there. Jerome McGinley never won a cup, still in the Hall of Fame. Ray Bourque likely would have been in the Hall of Fame had he not been traded to Colorado at the trade deadline that season from Boston. I'm sure there are countless players that are in
Joe
that camp.
Thornton will be in the Hall of Fame.
Joe Thornton, Paul Kariya. Paul Kariya didn't even break 1,000 points.
Yeah.
So like there are opportunities for that when you're talking about the most elite players in the NHL, whether after their career or during their career. But it's gonna be hard for him to kind of break out of get in the top two. I mean, he's in the top of the league for sure, but like the difference between what's the difference between Shesterkin and Sorokin right now is Shesterkin grabbed his team and said, "We're going as far as I can take you." That's the difference. Sorokin has not
Mhm.
had that opportunity. Sorokin has not
In the
had that
playoffs, you
opportunity
mean?
in the playoffs.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
you know
you're
what?
right.
He didn't necessarily do it. Now, did he play really well despite the team being shit? Yes, you can't take that away from him. There's another level there, right?
Well,
There's
how
another
about this
like
though?
them making the playoffs down the stretch where he was just absolute lights out didn't happen.
Well, all right, but how about this? Last season, first round of the playoffs, I don't just play the Penguins. Semyon Varlamov was shit. Trot says, "Okay, Sorokin, you're in,"
I think he got hurt.
and well,
Didn't
he was all,
Varlamov get hurt?
but he was bad at one point.
I mean, this I'm not saying
He
that, but I
probably
think he
got
was
hurt
out.
too.
He Sorokin ultimately got some starts in the second round.
He went 4-1 and is 1-0 in series. Basically, after being down, just put Sorokin in, made a couple of Ilya Sorokin type saves that will leave your jaw on the floor, and essentially won them that round.
Yeah, some of this might be Trotz not just saying he's the hot goalie, let's run with him, and maybe that would have been the difference in that Tampa Bay series. We can say we can play that game forever. Varlamov was still really good. I don't think you could take any,
No,
you
I'm with
can't.
you.
I don't think you can sit there and be like Sorokin would be the difference.
No,
Barry
I'm
Trotz,
with you.
blah blah blah. Like I don't think that's the conversation. But
Yeah,
that didn't happen where Sorokin had that opportunity, and so much of this is opportunity.
yeah. No, I'm with you.
So I think once given the opportunity to do it, he needs to be the difference maker. Look, he played really well this year. His stats were really good. The team stunk. Even being as good as he was, he didn't make the team better. He made them not
See,
as bad.
I have issue there. I have issue there
He made the
because
team not as bad as they could have been,
it took
or that they should have been.
Semyon Varlamov went like 12 straight starts without a win when he finally came back. And in that span of time, Sorokin accrued like a over 500 record.
Oh, and he ended the season with an over 500 record.
No,
But
yeah, but
and it just
my point is when Varlamov was in net at the beginning of the season, look, Varlamov eventually figured it out. But at the beginning of the season, when he came back from injury, there was a point in time where it took him 10 to 12 games. I don't remember exactly
oh, it was a
to
really too
find his
long.
first win. It was too long to find his first win. But in that same span of 10 to 12 games, uh, Sorokin had an over 500 record and was playing very well. So I get what you're saying playoffs wise, but there has been opportunity for Sorokin to elevate his team because there have been so many, and I said it to you before, statistically, he has made so many saves above anticipated that he shouldn't have made.
Yeah,
And,
I
and
I
that's
get
and
that.
that's
I
the
get that.
thing. He's first overall in the league
I
in that
think
statistic.
I think Shesterkin's played more games than Sorokin.
Not this season. I think it's maybe one overall, maybe, but this season, no. 52 for Sorokin, and Shesterkin played 53.
Yeah, I think, but Shesterkin's played 100 games,
Oh, yeah. Sorokin's played 74.
so
Not that big
that's
a
not that.
difference.
It's not a big difference, but I don't know. I just think he needs.
It's a
He
you
has
know what?
another
The
year.
argument is so close, I think. I think
It
that's
is. I'm
the
not saying.
takeaway
I'm
here.
Look, if the conversation is when you're talking about the top three goalies in the league, is Sorokin in there? 100%. You're not going to get an argument from me. Is he fighting right this second for the second spot? It's very close,
I'm with you.
right? I'm not like So I think that's kind of um the basis, the foundation of what I'm trying to say is, yeah, you're like I said, your argument and your the numbers are there. Can he
They
do it
are.
again? Can he be literally the rock the Islanders need if they're going to play a little bit more of an offensive game? Can he elevate from there or continue to be that good? It remains to be seen. He
Time will
needs to
tell.
do it 2 years in a row. And I
Time will
don't think
tell.
Shesterkin necessarily has done that either, but he has that playoff run, which gives him that edge. That's the difference right now.
Well,
Shesterkin, that team can come back without some of that depth that the Rangers might lose. They won't have the room and be shit next year.
in order for Sorokin to be look, I think he did run away with the number one position last season. Eventually, it became his. But in order for him to maintain that, maybe it does become true if Sorokin is indeed close to or on the same level as the two other goaltenders we were comparing. Um, should the Islanders trade Varlamov?
I guess I want to know who the replacement is.
Right, that's the
That's
question.
yeah, I
And you almost wonder because I was going through trade scenarios. I wrote that article on three destinations that he could end up in, and ironically, two of them were in the Western Conference Final, right? Because you wonder if Varlamov maybe changed his mind on Edmonton, seeing how
that
far they went.
that's part of this issue is that he has half the league where he can choose
He
to
does.
simply not go.
The other thing that comes to my mind is, well, Colorado might need a goaltender because uh, Darcy Kemper is going to be a UFA, and his injury history, I feel like maybe there could be contract complications there because he might want more term. And again, pure speculation, but you could see it happening. And Francois is a good goaltender. He's not a starter.
They have a whole
Might they
lot of
be?
issues to go through cap wise
Yeah.
this
So
offseason.
might they be
Some
interested
room, but
in having Varlamov as a stopgap for 1 year? Maybe that's possible. The other team is another reunion possibility in the Washington Capitals because they had two goaltenders this season who were less than what they expected. Uh, Vanacek was, I shouldn't say that. I think Vanacek was above what they expected. I think he's been good out of nowhere. I think Samsonov was very disappointing. I don't know if they're going to give up on him or not, but my point is they're both RFAs. You wonder if there's a swap there, right? Reunion back with Washington for Varlamov. Maybe one of the young RFAs can now be the backup for Sorokin, right? Because
I
they'll
don't know about that. I think you're gonna go get go get assets for the RFA on a team that can give it to you, not just
and
have
that's possible
security
too.
on with Varlamov. Just
Yeah,
my 2 cents on it.
that's possible too. But and then you have the other teams honorable mentions to Seattle Kraken, who they lost Dreger for most of the year. Maybe even the New Jersey Devils, who Mackenzie Blackwood was not what they thought he might be, and there's no goaltenders in the pipeline. And if Varlamov doesn't want to go far from, Long Island where he's made a home, and I put somebody else in there too. Maybe it was the Maple Leafs. Maybe it was somebody else who needs goaltending. But there will be a market for sure. Um, but you're right. You want to know who's going to back up Sorokin only because look at what happened in the the Western Conference Final. There was 4 goaltenders who were featured in that series, and that becomes the problem, right? You can't have Sorokin and Joe Schmo as your tandem because, knock on wood, God forbid something happens to Sorokin, you're now relying on a backup goaltender where this new NHL is a 2 goaltender league. You need 2 to be successful.
Yeah,
And
and
unless you're the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Colorado Avalanche, I'll tell you that much because
well,
those are 2 teams who are actually in the final and don't have 2 goaltenders. They have Vasilevsky and I think it's still Brian Elliott.
it is.
And they have Kemper and Francois, who again, a fine goaltender, not a starter at the NHL level.
So I think that's where I don't even know what the opportunities are there where they really make sense and they maintain a really good tandem for the Islanders, and that's kind of the problem. Looking at it from like a cap space thing or even an assets like claiming assets to then flip for something, absolutely. That makes sense. I understand why you want to trade Varlamov. Thinking about it a little bit more long term, then what? Skarek is likely not ready.
Yeah.
Um,
You wonder if the Islanders do draft a goaltender in this draft.
I mean, that's also something else, and they usually go a little bit late, so I don't think it's that much of a. I'm not worried about like the 13th pick being the goalie. I think it's pretty rare. Um, though the Islanders has done it twice, um, so who knows? But we also don't have Mike Milbury as a GM anymore, so thank God. But um, yeah, I mean, Varlamov doesn't play as many games as he used to. He's played under 40 games the last 2 seasons. Granted, injuries and shortened seasons and all that. He hasn't like his record hasn't been terribly good. His numbers have been good with the Islanders, particularly last season. His best career in the NHL. His best numbers in the NHL were last season in 36 games, but it was 36 games. Um, how well it's kind of like Thomas Greiss for a while where when he played like 41 games or 38, 39 games, those were the years when you look at his numbers where they were the best. When he played anything more than that, it just like didn't work for whatever reason. Um, so if the Islanders can, give the reins to Sorokin, and I don't think that's a huge issue as far as their confidence in him. It's the back-to-backs, the inevitable couple of COVID games that are going to be canceled, and you're going to have a tough stretch where a lot of games in a row. Who else can you trust? And I frankly do not know who is available. And again, are you going to make another trade? In that case, it's gonna cost assets. It's not going to be Varlamov for another goalie. Like that kind of swap is very. I don't know how that.
Oh, yeah, no, I meant like these hockey trades. It could be something bigger.
It could, but if you're going to sign somebody, like who are the free agent goalies, right? That coming in like this offseason.
I
I've
think the
not heard.
only I think
I've
the
not heard that
only
talked about
free
at all.
agent goaltender who, in my
Fleury.
mind, would be comfortable. I don't think he would accept a position as the backup. I don't think
Okay,
I don't
there you
think
go.
Jack Campbell would either. So you're really
He's
looking at
injury prone. I wouldn't.
yeah,
Campbell is not the guy,
you're really looking at Braden Holtby.
and
Eh,
that doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies, frankly.
no,
So there's a good percentage of the team you're run. There's 3/4 of the team you're just going to run back, more than that, because you're looking at 2 defenders and maybe 2 forwards, depending on who leaves the roster and if there's room for it. I don't know that this is like if he's going to come off the books next year, that is a risk that I'm willing to take. Run this tandem back. I get
so
why it makes sense, but I'd be more interested in who that replacement's going to be for him, and then how that money's going to be used because that's great that you have $5 million now, and maybe you sign somebody for $1.5 million, $2 million. But so you have $3 more million to play with. Then what? Right.
So my question to you is, and then we'll move on to the mailbag. Um, you have Johnny Gaudreau ready to sign up 8 years, no, 7 years, sorry, $10 million AAV. But the only way Johnny Gaudreau can sign up is if we or the Islanders trade away the $5 million in cap space that Semyon Varlamov possesses. You don't know who your next backup goaltender is going to be, only because you have to trade him away now in order for Johnny Gaudreau to sign the dotted line. Do
You
you do
can't
it?
trade Bailey. There's no takers for Bailey. You
Nope.
can't like this
Nope.
is
It's
the
it's just Semyon Varlamov. Semyon Varlamov is holding you back from signing Johnny Gaudreau at $10 million. Do you trade him right now with the uncertainty of who your backup goaltender is in the future? As soon as next season.
I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, your offense gets significantly better. You're just really rolling the dice having
You are.
Sorokin play 60 games, um, which I think would be a lot, but he could do it. I think he wants to play, so he might be one of the rare goalies that plays into the 50s, if not getting 60 games. Um, I don't know. It's a scary thought. In that case, if you're gonna 20 games could be the difference though. Like that goalie needs to win. They need to be a 500 goalie. I don't know who's out there that can be a 500, just like out of the box, a 500 goalie. Is that Holtby? Can he just win
I think it
11
could be,
games?
yeah.
He needs
But
to win 11 out of 21 games. That's all we would really be asking of him at that point. And let Sorokin kind of do the rest. Right? You're talking about you need 10 to 15 wins from your backup, and you need 35 from your starter. You need to win north of 40 games, well north of 4, maybe even 45 games to make the playoffs, right? And that's with like loser points and blah, blah, blah. Who can do that? Who can kind of guarantee you 10, let's call it 12 to 15 wins out of 21 to 23 games? Who can guarantee you that? Don't know.
how times have changed when your 1B goaltender makes it hard for you to make a decision on whether you let him go in order to retrieve a first line forward. Hockey fans, the pursuit for the Stanley Cup is on, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, has an unbelievable offer for the most exciting playoffs in sports. New customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $100 in free bets, no matter what, win or lose. Looking to turn a small bet into a big payday during the playoffs? With DraftKings same-day game parlays, you can do just that. Create your own parlay by combining multiple bets, like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more. It's your shot at even bigger payouts. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, bet $5 on any NHL team to win, and get $100 in free bets, no matter what. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. All right, it's mailbag time, Mr. John Zella.
It is.
I
And
forget
we got a
how
good
we
response.
haven't done this in a while. We got a really good response. Who reads these usually? Is it me or you?
I don't know. I mean, like I think the last time we did it, I was in the captain's chair.
Oh, okay.
But now that it's switched, maybe it's just who's ever the main host here. I don't know. I'm not.
I mean, I could do it. I've been I passed school. I passed all my classes. I know how to read.
You read good.
I read good. Not well. I read good.
Great. Then you go for it.
All right, our first question here comes from @Eric's Vogel. How can the Islanders ever hope to bridge the talent gap between themselves and the two teams currently contending for the cup?
Sign good players, and
Uh,
you need to get more out of who's in your lineup. You need a kid. You need a Wallstrom, and you eventually need a Ratu to kind of come in there. Just that, like, kind of modeling a little bit more after the Lightning than the Avalanche. Um, you need to be able to develop some players, and it's not a lot, right? Like that pipeline needs to be there because eventually you need to pay them, like after they're an RFA, and the Lightning just kind of keep finding players with the crunch that can come up. And they had a whole new third line this year. That was the big thing. Can they do it again with a whole new third line? This and that, and they keep figuring it out. So I think some of these, like, if that's Bellows, if that's Wallstrom, if that's Ratu, if that's Holmstrom, like Holmstrom rather, someone needs to hit and be cheap for the Islanders and just be good, right? They need a kid line. They need a something like the Rangers had. They need that extra punch. They need a first line first and foremost,
Yeah.
but they need like that. The potential P3 line of Parise, Peugeot, and Palmieri needs to like pop off. They need to be winning Islander games during the regular season for a stretch. Like they need to be a catalyst for them winning games. And in the playoffs, they need to be responsible for a series win. Like each
Yeah.
of the
You're one of
lines need to have their moment. Like
that's
they
one of
need to
your
be able
favorite
to.
things is bottom sixes win you championships, and you're absolutely right.
At the end of the day, yeah, I think they play a bigger role than people give them credit for. But each of the lines on the Islanders, they need to kind of go back to that. I want to say the first final Eastern Conference final run. But even in that Penguin series, it was like with this in the sweep, there was just line after line after line. It didn't matter who was out there; somebody was going to do it for them. That was the difference. That's the team. That is the identity of this team, of being able to roll those lines, have every line going. Someone's going to be the hero. Someone different every single night. That's the difference. It's not a talent, just a talent thing. It's line construction. It's one player here, one player there. Yeah, Goudreau, I think, makes a huge difference, right? That's again, like I said last episode, you're not going to hear from me that a player like that's or Fiala is going to be bad for the team. Um, but they better damn well be a hero one night or multiple nights. That line, Barzell's got to step up. There's so much, like, yes, you're going to add a player and this and that, but like they need, and this is part of what I was saying with Lambert, like he needs to get more out of the players in the lineup. Something Trotz at the end couldn't do. That's the difference. I think that's the talent gap. Some of it's going to be strategy. Some of it's going to be adding those players. Some of it's going to be who internally can really turn it on. Can Wallstrom just be that 30 goal scorer that you were saying he was last year, that he could have had that potential to be? Can Barzell really? We did not see him take a game over.
He needs to be an 80-point player, not 85, maybe 90 points even.
He needs to be, again, Sorokin needs to be that player. Barzell needs to be that player. Dobson needs to be that player. Pulak
So that's a
Pollock
good
need to be
point.
that.
I wanna cut in right there real quick. Is I look at the parallels to Tampa Bay. They have a number one defenseman, Victor Hedman. The Islanders have a budding superstar in Noah Dobson, who could potentially be a number one defenseman. For the since Mark Streit, and if you could even call him that, they don't really have a true number one defenseman. So I think a number one defenseman is vitally important um, to be able to bridge this gap. A lot of people will talk about how Pellick is number one defenseman. He's the Islanders' number one defenseman probably at this moment. However, he doesn't bring to the table the same things that a Victor Hedman or a Cale Makar bring to the table, and that's okay. He's a number one defenseman in his own right, but he doesn't bring that offensive side to it. Maybe a little more this season with 28-ish points. He was he pretty much had his best year, but that's not number one defenseman material just yet. It's an elite defenseman. It's a very good defenseman on the other side of the ice, but it's not number one material. Noah Dobson could be that. We'll see soon. Not sure yet. You need a number one goaltender. Ilya Sorokin is like we said earlier in the show, putting himself in the same conversation as guys like Shesterkin and Vasilevsky. So we'll see when the going when they get going in the playoffs, if they get back, if he can solidify himself as a Vasilevsky type.
The Islanders
So
are there by and large, right? Like they have three really good defensemen.
yeah,
Mayfield is there as that kind of
Stay at home
Zach
guy.
Bogosian type, so as
Yeah.
far as, Sorokin is there in that conversation with Vasilevsky. I'd say the Islanders defense is mostly there. They need those supporting players. Up the middle, the Islanders are great. But we need more out of Barzal. It's the supporting cast. It's the wingers.
Yeah, I think
That's the
it's the
difference.
supporting cast. They have the pieces. They just now need to put the cherry on top, right? The cake is made, or the ice cream sundae is made. Put the cherry on top. Get your stars. You have your defenseman. You have your goaltender. You have your structure, right? You have your center, right? And this is how Lamorello likes to build his teams from the net out. He has his goaltender. He has his defenseman. He has his center, which comes next after the defenseman in Barzell. Nelson's great there too. Pajot is an excellent third center. Um, Next comes the wingers, and he has a decent supporting cast. He needs his stars, and I think that will bring this team full circle and back into the picture where they're supposed to be. Great question. At Ariel Cornfield or Ariel underscore Cornfield asks, who do you realistically think Lou goes after? I'm not a huge fan of the Fiala trade. I think there is way better options out there. And I'll start this one by saying there are good options out there. The Pasternak thing happened, and that was obviously, if there's any truth to the fact that he could possibly be available, he would be the top dog, right? Then there's DeBrinket, who would be another one. Um, Probably right after Pasternak, two consecutive, or not two, not consecutive, but two 40 goal seasons. Maybe two consecutive paced 40 goal seasons. He's just a bona fide goal scorer, something the Islanders don't necessarily have in a sniper like him. Brock Nelson scored 37, but he's not exactly a sniper. He's just a really good goal scorer. DeBrinket type is someone who could pair well with Barzell. And then after that, um, I do think that Fiala is the third best guy available out there, unless you're looking over to Columbus and saying, "What are you doing with Patrick Laine?" But I don't think that that's a fit. Fiala for me, listen, 33 goals, 85 points. He did that mostly on a line with just Frederick Gaudreau. He wasn't um a product of Kirill Kaprizov. He did this mostly at 5-on-5, scoring 27 goals himself. I think that although you don't love him as an option, and yes, I could agree with you, there are better options out there. You're not giving up an arm and a leg for him, for
I think
Kevin
that's the
Fiala.
thing is, and that's what we were discussing last show was
Yeah,
if you can get Fiala and you can make a trade that doesn't include Bavillier, um,
yeah.
and you can get Bailey off the books, that's a really good roster,
Because I'll tell
right?
you
Like,
this, I think what I love in Alex DeBrinket, of course, but do I love Alex DeBrinket more than I love Kevin Fiala and Jacob Chikrin? I think
right,
I
or
rather
something,
the pair.
or like as we were saying last time, maybe the Islanders don't need to kind of break up the offense as much, and they need to add to it, and they don't need to trade a Bavillier and a this and a that for a Chikrin or whatever it's going to cost to get a Chikrin, and they can get somebody else that's again going to enable Dobson to be that player and be a more of a rock, and then find the third pairing player, or just let Salo and ride with it. They could probably go into the season with a few $1 million in cap space. Um, Not too much to worry about as far as Barzell, and have a really deep roster, especially up front. If you can keep Bavillier, Barzell, Fiala up front, that's a really good line.
Yeah, I'm
And then
with
the
you.
rest of the rest of the roster, it gives Wallstrom a shot on that second line. You can swap him with Palmieri if you want. Um, I think that's fine. That honestly gives them a lot of room, because the thing is with getting, obviously a free agent is good, but those free agents are going to be really expensive. You trade for Fiala and then sign him as an RFA. You have a little bit more leeway on what the dollar amount is.
Yep.
Um, and the Wild can't take roster players back that aren't RFAs like Wallstrom or Bellows or whatever that are really cheap, right? So that gives the Islanders a lot of leeway
Yeah.
as far as that's concerned. It's not gonna, you can save those assets for to trade for a defenseman. Um, I think Fiala's younger than Goudreau as well,
Yep.
and and Forsberg, so you're going to
Yep.
get a lot more years out of them. I don't know. Yes. Are there better options in the short term? Yeah. Okay. It's hard to argue with that. If you can get them to sign and not have to give up any assets at all and save them for a defenseman, I'm here for that. But thinking about the long term of the team, I don't know. I think I want to open the window, not just more in the short term, but for longer. So like I said, you're not going to hear from me that adding any one of those players is going to be bad, but thinking about the long term, I think Fiala really is the best option.
Yeah. Another good question. Thank you for that, Ariel. Next up, at Caesar0406, and I say Caesar because it's literally
Well, it's
Zar,
Czar.
not Caesar.
No, it's Czar.
uh, okay, I guess it's Czar. I just didn't take it that way because
Because there
of
are
the
2 ways to
shortened
spell it. It's
spelling.
a
Yeah,
little confusing. I know.
but maybe you
You're
can
just a teacher. I
clarify
know
that
that's confusing.
for us on shut up. Maybe you can clarify that for us on Twitter. But anyway, good question here. And what would Lou's excuse be if he fails to sign a top tier UFA, meaning Gaudreau or Forsberg, and slash or trade for an impact player such as Fiala, Pasternak, etc. Thoughts, John?
I mean, look at Panarin. It just didn't take the deal. And you throw money at him and all this stuff. I don't know what the excuse would be. It's a really good question. Um,
I don't
could
think
be
there is one.
could be a bad like everything's working in the team's favor outside of really just the last season. But there's so many bright spots, and especially where this player, whoever is brought in, would be playing. Not even presumably, they're playing with Barzell. There's really not that much. The second player, who knows, right? It could be a right winger to play on the second line. It could be a first line winger to play with Barzell, left winger to play with Barzell. It really depends. Um, or it could be, yeah, depending on who the free agent is and where they play. It could be left or right, whatever. I don't know what the excuse would be.
I
Like,
don't.
oh, it wasn't the right price. Like he could say anything. We had issues with certain players in term. We had issues in
Sure.
certain players and the amount. Um, they got a better offer quicker than they just accepted a better offer than us. I don't know. I don't think there are too many. I think it would. I said he was on the hot seat.
Yeah,
I
and that's the
stand
thing.
I stand by that, right? Like, I do not think Ledecky and Malkin are like, Lou's gotta go. He's on his last thing. But the seat is warming up. I think fans it'll heat up faster with the fans than it will the ownership. They have to have a little bit of patience. I think they understand what this is. Because if they really thought he was on the hot seat, maybe he would have been gone this year too. Um, if it's another terrible year with or without a top tier UFA, I don't know that if he survives. I have to be perfectly honest with you. I don't
And
know what
that's
would need to happen, but I don't know what the excuses would be, and I don't know what those conversations were like between him and ownership. Can he explain his way out of it? Is that even a thing he needs to do as Lou Lamoriello? I have a hard time believing that, but I don't know what the excuses would be.
I don't think there is one because he's been so open about having to improve the roster, needing to get more offense out of the defense, adding to adding to this roster in order to get back to the playoffs and return to Stanley Cup contention. He's those are words that he said. He expects more out of this group, and you can't expect more out of them if you don't improve on them. So, because he's been so open about this and has said specifically that he needs to improve the roster with hockey trades and he needs to add to this group in order to, although he still believes in them, he wants to improve them. Again, the fact that he's been so open about it, now what's your excuse? You literally said we needed to improve on this team. So how do you do that? You're the guy who does that. And if you don't, you really don't have an excuse. And like John said, and we've repeated to say, he is on the hot seat. The owners want to put asses in seats, and you guys aren't buying tickets if you're not excited about a product on the ice that's not going to win you games. So there is no excuse in my mind. I think that if he doesn't pull through this season, good chance that you see him move on to his next endeavor, whatever that may be.
Yeah, that
Uh,
conversation definitely needs to happen.
great question. Next up is at Pizza Sports Guy. Um, in that order, or is it like sports you like first and then pizza?
I don't know. Right now, all I can think about is food. I'm starving, so I
If the big names come off the board, Forsberg, Gaudreau, etc., who's the under the radar name the Islanders could look into for more firepower up front?
that's a great question. I don't know that I have anyone like I think I'm so focused on like if they don't do it, I don't know the direction of the team.
Yeah,
Um, but I don't really know who those players would be, to be
I
perfectly honest with you.
I don't think that this is a guy. I have two names in the back of my mind, both coming from the same team. One is going to be a free agent, possibly. Don't really know yet. Another one is a player who his future with the team is a little clouded. They're not sure what that is. I'll start with the most unlikely thing to happen in Evander Kane.
Whew.
I know
I
you
think
hate
as a Lamorello thing alone, I
it's
feel like
super
that's not.
unlikely, but if you
Yeah,
get desperate, do you just do it? And do you do it on a 1 year basis? Because it seems like when this guy gets a little bit of term, he gets comfortable. What are you going to do? I have term. I have protection. You can't fire me. If you do it on a 1 year basis and he lights up, the league for 30 goals this year. I mean, look what he did with the Oilers. He was really good. Now as a person, does he fit? I don't think so. But if you
it's
get desperate
39
and
points in 43 games.
yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. So if you get really desperate and you lose out on all those guys, do you turn to Evander Kane and say, "Okay, I'll pay you $8 million for a year. Come play for a year, bridge that gap, find
Do
your
it.
guy next year."
Yeah, I think they need to know that, like, especially with Barzell, like that's not a good look for him. Like, I don't think that's what he wants to see. I think he
Yeah,
wants to see, more than that. I thought you were gonna say Burakovsky if he makes it.
I don't like that
With
he's been a scratch for the Avalanche, so I'm sort of coming off of that boat.
I mean, 61 points in 80 games. It's definitely an under the radar. He's 27, so he kind of fits in that where the Islanders are. Um, as far as that's concerned. Um, I'm not really sure who's going to move the needle. I think mostly it's hard because I'm not sure who's actually available as a UFA and who just like hasn't signed the deal yet, and they're having conversations because there's a lot of players that have scored over 40 points last season that could potentially they would be better as the second forward the Islanders sign to make that first line if it's not going to be like Pavilier, Barzell, and Fiala or whoever or Goudreau. Burakovsky. There's Valerie Nichushkin
He was the other guy I was thinking
with
of.
with Colorado again, 25 goals in 62 games. Niederreiter, um, Mason Marchment. Maybe he can really step up. 47 points in 54 games. Is that an option one way or another? Either even if he's your 1B option as that other winger, if it comes down to it, um, that's not a bad option. Some of these guys are much cheaper as well. I mean, like Pittsburgh's Evan Rodriguez, Rickard Raquel. They're not
Those
like
aren't.
they're not jumping off the page to me. But like there really isn't anybody. I mean, Kadri needs a deal. He's a center. Um, do you just go for it? I don't know. Um, Claude
Yeah,
Drew is not it. Bergeron is not coming. Um, per uh, Perron, oof. Again, as
they're
the
already
other,
talking about how he's going to be staying in St. Louis.
yeah, even if he was available, he's the other guy. I don't think he's your guy. Um, so yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think the thing is
One
if Lamorello can make the deal for Fiala at or before the draft,
that's huge.
I think you just do it. I
You
think you
have
just
to.
lock it up and get it done. If
Yeah.
you're going to UFA, you are really risking not coming away with anybody.
Yeah, and that's the biggest takeaway for me here is you're really toying with the fact that you're risking not getting the guy you need because there's talk that Gaudreau wants to stay in Calgary. Forsberg's already been openly having discussion with Nashville about returning long term. Um, it really feels like, unfortunately, the trade market is the only way this team is going to improve on at the top level, right? You need your top four guy, you need your top line winger, and it feels like trade might be the only option here,
Not
and
the
that's
only,
why.
just like safe. If you can get it done,
Yeah,
do it.
okay,
Like,
that's a
it's
better
just
word
safer. You're
for it.
you're you're rolling the dice by waiting for UFA.
Yeah, and the
Unless
one
you
of the
know you're getting one of those 3 players, like, someone's gotta say yes. You have your priority list, blah, 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 like, that's totally fine, but, ugh, I don't
And they
like
they need a
I don't
defenseman. There's not really many good defensemen that are gonna be available in the UFA market. There's Chris Letang, who's a right side guy. I don't know if he fits. There's John Klingberg, and he wants 8 freaking years at 30 years old. I just don't, or it'll be 7 if he gets to UFA, but I just don't see any defense options. So you have to also keep that in mind if you're going to be trading assets. Are you going to be able to trade for multiple positions? You need your forward, you need your defenseman. Um, and so if it comes to striking out on those top tier guys, you might have to trade for a guy who may not cost you as much as a DeBrincat. And one guy that comes to mind for me was the other guy on Edmonton that I was talking about earlier. You did mention Val Nichushkin. That was one I was thinking of. If he gets to free agency, that might be a good pick. But the other guy I was thinking of, who has been vocal about wanting an increased role with his team, with the Oilers, is Puljujärvi. 24 years old. He's a winger. He's a right winger. He's been playing mostly bottom 6 minutes, but he's a former first round draft pick, fourth overall, and he was a pretty good goal scorer in the Finnish league for Aatu Ratu's former club in Karpat. So um, I wonder if that's something that maybe they buy low on it and try out.
he again, as the guy to play with Barzell, no. As the other guy, maybe.
Yes.
If you're gonna give up Bavilier, to open the cap space and do that whole rigmarole, absolutely. Granted, Pugliarvi also makes a decent amount. Well, no, he doesn't. So he's an RFA. His next deal won't be that much.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if you can save a couple $1,000,000 there and kind of have somewhat of a replacement and figure things out from there, I don't know if that's somebody that Lamoriello would take a shot on. I don't think Lamoriello is thinking about who we're taking a shot on. I think he's got to go for that like
He's
bullseye.
going for the guarantee. He's going
Even
for the
even
Yep.
that third pairing defenseman, whoever, if it's not Salo necessarily, and it's someone to play with Salo, he's going for bullseye. That everything has to work.
Yep.
This isn't toss it up and see. Um, it's gotta like I've been saying. I think it's when we see these players come in and these trades take place and whatever's going on, we have to go, yep, that's gonna work. That'll do it. I don't want to have to think about it for more than a second. I have to gut check these moves and go, absolutely. I'm not even going to look at the advanced analytics. Absolutely, this player works. This team is better. They added 3 or 4 players, and this team is better than last year. Wrap it up until training camp.
Yep.
I don't even want to think about it. That's kind of the problem. I don't. I have a hard time thinking about who those other players would be,
Yeah. So
and frankly, they're not available.
yeah,
But,
it's a good question. Who's really next in that pecking order? But and I think we answered that for you, kind of long winded. But I do think that he does, meaning Lamorello, need to nail that top end guy, whoever that may be. So, and it could even be somebody we're not even talking about. We continually talk about Gaudreau, Forsberg, Fiala, but there's a possibility there's guys out there who could be acquired. Like what's going on in Winnipeg right now, I'm not sure. Is there a possibility that a Nick Ehlers could eventually become available? I don't know, but
someone said Josh Anderson, which I very much hope does not happen.
yeah,
He is
that's
just
not the move.
he's not the guy.
No.
Not in your top line.
But
That's not your guy.
yeah, so
But
I think he'll figure out who that top line guy is, because he doesn't really have any other choice but to. Good question. Marchese Elite says, if Ratu doesn't make the roster, where does he end up? Does he play on the wing or at center, pushing one of the current centers to the wing? Um, in my mind, I don't know that a rookie would ever come in and push out a center who's staying with the team. And typically, or traditionally, centers who come up to the NHL and start their careers at that level start on the wing anyway. Barzell is an exception, and some other really elite centers are exceptions there. But I think of Jesper Kotkaniemi. He started with the Canadians as a center. Um, didn't really flourish. There was a lot of talk about how they rushed him at that position. Should have let him get his feet wet on the wing and learn the pace because you have a lot more responsibility as a center. And I think that's probably the route that they should take with Ratu whenever he does arrive. And if that is that this season, that's only an excellent thing for the Islanders. That means he's ready and he's pushing the needle. But if they do have him on the roster in any capacity, I do believe it would be on the wing, just because again the Islanders are so deep at the center position right now, and it would just be best for his development to play on the wing and learn from a center while playing on the wing. You
Yeah,
know, you're
I think he's playing. He would if he's going to make the roster and kind of be with the team, he would split time with Parise
right.
on that line.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So, um, he would learn from the centers, and he would also simultaneously learn the game, the pace, and how to be an NHLer.
Yeah, I he has an opportunity. He can really impress and kind of go from there. But he would be splitting time for sure. Of anyone's spot on the team to kind of steal, I think Wallstrom better be looking over his shoulder. Frankly,
That's a good.
if
Uh,
Ratu really has a good, um, sorry, like an animal just like went on my porch, so um, like a bird or something almost hit my window.
Side note: my wife has been going on these nature walks just because, and she's been getting attacked by a hummingbird twice now.
Interesting.
Yeah,
There's a lot of hummingbirds here. There's a lot of just a lot of different birds, but
yeah. There's a specific species of hummingbird that's aggressive at this time of year, but more on that maybe later or off the show.
on our bird watching show, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll save that story for there. So yeah, I think Wallstrom's got to look over his shoulder a little bit. If Ratu kind of just really comes in and is mature, because you got to remember he's a little older, right? He's is he any
Right.
older than Wallstrom or they're the same age?
Ratu?
Yeah,
No, he's a year
no,
younger,
he's
I
a year
believe.
younger. So I mean, I think it's worth like he did have that year. He's been playing against men. He had a really good year after the trade, Ratu. Um, so that's an opportunity. He could split time with Parise. Um, I think he's ultimately starting in Bridgeport, which is totally fine. I don't think that's behind schedule or anything. But yeah, he's definitely playing on the wing. Um, and if the Islanders are going to have somebody young in their lineup, it may be Wallstrom or Ratu. I don't think it's both.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Okay, next question. At El Fahey says, who do you think Lou will be able to sign slash trade for the top six and with a top four defenseman to play with Dobson? Is it Charo or Chariot?
Sherratt, also
Sherrod,
Fahey.
Sherrod Martinez, which I believe that's Alec Martinez
Yeah,
from Vegas, would be my choices for defense. Curious how it shakes out. You have a busy summer ahead. Keep up the good work. Thank you for that. Um, yeah, like I said earlier about Fiala, I think he's the best option because it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg.
yeah. We don't need to go over the
Don't
forwards
need to go over that again. So he slots in perfectly, age, um, deployment, and all. One of the defensemen that I have had my eye on, and I wonder how it shakes out because Johnny Gaudreau needs a contract in Calgary. Matthew Kachuk needs a contract. Andrew Mangiapane needs a contract. Oliver Shillington needs a contract. That's a left defenseman, in my opinion, who I would be all over right now, calling Brad Treliving in Calgary and saying, listen, you have to sign Gaudreau. You have to sign Kachuk. You have to sign Mangiapane. You have a number of defensemen under contract. Do you have the capacity to sign Shillington? Can I make that easier for you? Let me sign him. He's maybe 24, 25 years old. He had a really good season playing top four minutes next to Chris Tanev. Um, I had this idea where it's possible, even if you get a guy like Shillington, that you could end up splitting Pellick and Pollock and it working out because you're elevating Dobson to play with Pellick and you're bringing Pollock down to play a similar style that he was playing with Pellick, but with Shillington. And now you have two really good pairs.
I don't
I,
I
l-
don't
I
I don't see that, Frank. I understand where you're going.
whatever, even if it's a left defenseman to play with Dobson, both situations work. He's a young defenseman who can play with another young defenseman in Dobson, and that could just be your second pairing tandem or eventually top tandem for the Islanders for the foreseeable future.
That
I
could work if it's not a Chikrin, maybe that's where you go.
Yeah,
In my gut, and I think, like, you pushed back a little bit on me last time when I said, Ian Cole or, Sherrod or Martinez is another good option.
I don't love
Um,
Sherrod, but Ian
yeah,
Cole's
like,
better.
you pushed back a little bit, and my ultimately, you came around on I'm trying to think of what Lamoriello would want in what that pairing is and how he's gonna balance the group. And that's is like a veteran presence that is kind of like and just going to come in and do their job and not be flashy and this and that. That's why I think it might be one of those type of players, just so
Yeah,
that
which Alec Martinez is that guy if that's who we're talking about.
yeah. So like any one of those three, but Martinez, who's a little bit older, I don't know how like you can sign him for a couple of years, but 35, 34, 35, 36. Who knows? He's still playing well. It's not crazy. Um, but I have a feeling that that might be the direction that he goes. Um, if there was room to kind of like it's got to be somebody really good. So maybe you're right that he just really just nails it on every single level. Assuming it will just be very hard if he is going to go hard at Goudreau and not at Fiala, how hard it would be to make that deal um, with Calgary after they steal away Goudreau to then say like, oh, I'd also like to do this or even make the trade and then sign. I think it just maybe Lamro doesn't really care and just goes for it. I wonder how the order of those things goes. Um, is the player you're talking about from Calgary an RFA
Yes, he
or
is.
they no deal right now?
No deal right now.
So maybe that trade happens before the draft, and then Lamro goes, oh, I'm also going to pluck Goudreau from you, and like and just what does he care?
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, maybe it depends on the order, but that's entirely possible. So this is Killington, you said?
Yeah. Pronounced Shillington, but yes.
Shillington. Um, yeah, I mean, not a ton of experience. He played, his most games in the NHL last year. He played well. Um, anyone that we think is going to move the needle and just support. They don't need to be offensive necessarily. They just need to elevate Dobson. Pulak needs to show up. Dobson needs to continue growing. You can get a little more out of Pellick. You get a little more out of whoever this other pairing is going to be, and hopefully Salo, if he's the guy, paired with whomever, Andy Green, Nick Leddy, blah blah blah, can be a surprise. That's fine. You don't need a Chikrin necessarily. Um, to really move the needle, he's going to move the needle the most. But it's not. I don't know that it's 100% necessarily. I'm not going to be disappointed. That one has a little more latitude, I think,
Yeah.
than the forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. So there's a lot of ways that this could go down. And again, like I said earlier, could even end up being guys we're not even talking about. But um those are the guys that I would go after. I like a Fiala and a Shillington just for their ages, how much it extends the window and not just extends it, but also widens the window, like John said earlier. So good question. At Tihan531 says, if the draft was tonight, do they make the 13th pick or do they trade it? They absolutely trade the pick. I'm an advocate of trading it even before you get there. Lock down who you need to do, who you need now. You saw the other day the Dallas Stars just traded Ben Bishop's contract to the Buffalo Sabres, so you can do deals right now. It's not like you can't. Um, I would get that 13th pick moved as soon as you can, get your forward, solidify what you're going to be able to do moving into free agency, or get your defenseman, whatever, one or the other, solidify what you're going to be doing going into free agency. Have that security in, okay, one's already done, check. What's next? and move on. I don't see anybody down at the 13th pick moving the needle for the Islanders within the next 2 to 3 years, and that's
Oh,
just by
very
that time.
rarely. That's very rarely going to be the
Yeah.
case.
So, and by that time, the Islanders might be out of their win now window. So they should be trading the pick. I know that eyes are on Brad Lambert if he can maybe fall to that spot. Cutter Gauthier maybe even as well. A few other names, but and those are, don't get me wrong, will be nice players at some point who could do good things for the Islanders, but it's just not the time for the Islanders to be drafting in the first round right now when they have very specific needs. And that's one of their best assets to acquire said needs.
I agree. No need to add.
Okay, moving on to our last question from Flip 0077. Don't know if that was intentional or not. Um, but says, I thought this would be a fun question since you guys are always talking about the Isles going for it. What if they did a rebuild? Who would you keep and who would you trade?
So Kevin Kurz just did this. More
Did he?
about yeah. So he not like in this vein necessarily about a rebuild, about like who's untouchable,
Oh, I saw that. Okay.
who's likely to just stay because of who they are, and who can go, like, and who's like not coming back, and that's like Green and Chara. Although I'm not totally convinced until I see it happen. I'm not convinced Green isn't going to be back next to Salo and Mayfield next season.
Oh God.
Um, yeah, I think that might be possible. He splits time with Salo and whatever. It ushers him in that way. Um, and hopefully Salo just plays well enough they don't need him, and he's just a seventh defenseman and whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't even know how they would rebuild. I feel like it would be very, very hard with the way that the cap situation is. Um, they like all I can't even fathom this. I don't know that it's a fun question because it would mean that the Islanders went through a season where they were just terrible.
Yep.
And I don't even know where you start. These owners just like would not put up with that for a second. They would not be these mules and go through insurance and this player and get like the ghost of Datsuk and this player and that player. And I just don't think that they would let that happen. Um, I would better answer that question next season after this upcoming season than right now, because I think there's a lot of players that showed a lot of promise that are there. Um, Up the middle is fine. Like you'd have to find a way to get rid of like that Clutterbuck and Martin. Parise would just, I don't know where you'd put him, whatever, who cares? Um, I don't know who they'd replace some of these players with. I don't know. That's like anyone not Barzell, Pellick, and Sorokin. If you really wanted to get down to it,
Don't you mean Dobson?
yeah. I say Dobson, Pellick, Sorokin, Barzell. Anyone not those four players. If you're going to rebuild
Yeah.
and you actually can do it, anyone not name those players
Yeah. I'll echo that sentiment. I might deal Pellick for the right deal in a rebuild
in a rebuild. Sure, I
because you
guess.
you
I
look
guess
at
fine.
I look
He's
at
the first one
I
out of
look at
my
the New
group to
York
go.
Rangers. Not too long ago, did they send out the letter to their fans? Bear with us. We're going to go through a rebuild. We're going to do it the right way. And they did it the right way by starting with Ryan McDonough. And they got as much as they could in return for him. And that turned into draft capital and prospects. And, look at them now. They drafted the right players and they have the right young talent. Um, so you're looking at an aggressive kind of rebuild with like you said, these owners, right? They're not going to be for it this season. So I want to start by saying you're right there. It's not going to happen right now. Maybe next season if things don't go well, but not right now.
They missed
Um,
the playoffs. Yeah, there's a different conversation happening.
yeah, there is a different conversation, and I think you could see an aggressive rebuild happening. So if your name is not Matthew Barzell, Noah Dobson, Ilya Sorokin, probably Adam Pellick, you're probably fair game to be traded. It probably also does change who moves, who gets traded, because now you're open to trading guys like Anders Lee, Brock Nelson, JG Pajot, instead of moving guys like Robin Salo and Oliver Wallstrom, because those are your young pieces who can contribute to your aggressive rebuild in 2 to 3 years and be great NHL players. So Whereas right now we're open to trading Oliver Wahlstrom for a Kim Fiala. If he remains, and for some reason this is an unsuccessful season, now you're looking at Wahlstrom as a 22-year-old and saying, well, I want him around to grow with this core who we're building and drafting. Um, and now the whole perspective on who stays and goes changes. So um, I think that was a really good question because he's right. We don't talk a ton about that kind of situation. Um, and I agree with you, John. I don't think that that happens anytime until at least next July.
Yeah, I mean, I think you try to keep as many of the young guys around, the Salo, Wallstrom, whatever. But if you needed to
Yeah,
get the assets, the thing is, you're just like when you trade the young guys, you're pushing that even further when you can get back to
right.
it. Um, but yeah, mostly if you're not those guys, nothing else is nailed down.
Yeah.
Um, I can't even imagine. I don't know that I could do this.
It'll be
I can't
interesting.
Steve Dangle this and go through the depths and the muck of it. I'm not a fair weather fan, but like I've done this so many times and dealing with this thing. Like
Yes, but
I don't
I'll
have
say
the energy
this.
for that.
I'll say this. You have done it in whose era? What owner's era?
Oh, I mean, multiple other owners. I think it's
Right.
just yes.
This
I think they would.
ownership, I think that they would take a page out of the Rangers rebuild. I think they would take a page out of the Hurricanes build. Like this is not going to be okay. We're Detroit looking for our Steve Eiserman. This is going to be we're rebuilding and we're going to do it fast. In my opinion, I don't think
Yeah,
it's
I
going
mean,
to
they got to
take
figure out a
8
way.
years like the Red Wings have taken right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So. Really good questions. That wraps up our mailbag edition of this episode. And that wraps up the episode 112, John. 112. That number just keeps getting higher, and I get more surprised every time I hear it.
Yeah, the three
Um,
digit thing surprises me every time. I have to like type it somewhere or something like that.
yeah,
We're getting to the end of season 3.
yeah,
Yeah, excited. It might be a little bit of a slow summer. We have some guests coming up closer around the draft and free
yes, we
agency,
do.
but it might be a little bit of a slow summer. We'll see what happens, and who knows what
Yeah,
the schedule will be.
yeah, we will see. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nassau Hockey. You can find my work at the Fourth Period, John's work at the Hockey Writers, and check out Owl's Fix. Right now, no newsletters, but whenever there might be news, you might find one in your mailbox. Until next time, everyone, let's go Islanders.